48 years ago, I entered into professional school to be involved in the health field. When I worked with clients and patients, it was really obvious that there were correlations between the psychology and the physiology they were presenting. I saw patterns, repeated patterns, in people who were expressing certain symptomatology and certain stresses, certain perceptions, certain attitudes, certain interpretations, and I started correlating those. I would document those, and I would want to know why. I was always interested in etiology unknown. When they had no rationale for why a person had a condition, I was curious on the psychology of it. In my performal training, that wasn't really the emphasis. It was just something that I wanted to know for myself. The clinical aspects were very substantial, very important, but I was interested in the psychology of it for some reason. That was my love. I saw these patterns, and I could not overlook them. So I started accumulating a list of repetitive patterns that I saw with different conditions. I saw certain stresses that were underlying these things. And so that made me, when I was studying physiology, and particularly autonomic function and cell physiology and pathology and embryology, I saw correlations that I just couldn't ignore. And it seems like nobody seemed to be paying attention to it, but I was interested, and maybe a few of my other clients or colleagues were interested. And I noticed that when we are going through life, we perceive two basic things. We are infatuated with things that we like, that we seek, and we're resentful to things that we dislike and avoid. The two basic things are the polarities, the positives and negatives, you might say, the supportive and challenging perceptions we have in life. In the subcortical area of our brain called the amygdala, when it takes in sensory information, experiences, events, stimuli, it assigns a valency, positive or negative, to the event. If it's a positive valency, it represents prey. The subcortical area of the brain is a kind of an animal brain, and it deals with prey and predator. So if it's positive, it seeks it creates an impulse to want to consume it as prey. When it is negatively valent, it sees it as a predator. It wants to avoid it with an instinct. And so we have this impulse to seek, an instinct to avoid, seeking and avoiding, positive and negative, food and predator, you might say, prey and predator responses. One activates the parasympathetic nervous system. The other, the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is for rest and digest, because we want to consume it and eat it. And we rest and relax. And it kind of inhibits the excitations in our body and makes us subdue and relax for the nighttime. And the other one is during the day, where we fight or flight. And we now excite the body to keep it awake, ready for action. So one is kind of active and passive roles of life based on these perceptions. The parasympathetic and the sympathetic system are complementary, kind of like opposites. One turns on, one turns off. One awakens, one sleeps. Excites, inhibits. And one is the one for the predator and one's for the prey. Every cell, pretty well in your body, is impacted by those two sides of the autonomic nervous system. When they're in balance, you have autonomic regulation and wellness. When they're imbalanced and extreme, polarized, you get illness and autonomic dysregulation syndrome. Now the question is the cells are responding and creating symptoms. For instance, if all of a sudden you perceive a threat, a predator, a challenge, and the negative, and you have an instinct to avoid, you get adrenaline fired. When you get adrenaline firing, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your glucose in your blood goes up, blood sugar goes up. Your lipids go up, and you get platelets going up. For in case you get in a fight, you end up having to clot blood. So there's certain symptomatology that goes up when you have a perception of threat and challenge. And so you now have blood pressure goes up. Chronic perceptions of threat can lead to hypertension and diabetes. On the other side of the equation, you could have the parasympathetic, which lowers blood sugar, lowers blood pressure, lowers heart rate, bradycardia, not tachycardia, and hypotension instead of hypertension. It lowers it. And it lowers the clotting because you don't need a fight or flight. And it lowers the lipids. And so, because it doesn't need to refuel. So the physiology with its symptoms reveal the psychology in the perceptions. I'm going to say it again. The physiology with symptoms reveal the psychology perceptions. And I want to know what exactly is the physiology, and I trace the physiology to the psychology and the perceptual systems. And with every perception and psychology, you get a different ratio of all these neurotransmitters, neurohormones, neuroregulators, and signal molecules, as they call them. And so I mapped those. I made a list of them. I've got a vast list of every signal molecule, all the way from embryological origins all the way to an adult. And I looked at what ratios of perceptions impact these signal molecules and these hormones and transmitters, and what it does to various cells and why those cells respond. For instance, if all of a sudden you get the sympathetic, the bronchioles dilate because you need to run, you need breath. Your heart rate kicks in, your circulation goes up, you get turbulence, you dilate your bronchioles and open up your lungs for running. And the other, you shut it down. One kind of dries it out, the secretion, so you can have dilation, and the other one increases secretion so you're just resting and smoothly at night. So the symptoms in our lungs, the symptoms in our heart, the symptoms in our cardiovascular arteries and veins, the symptoms in our muscles, the symptoms in our digestive. When you're under the challenging part, the serous and the mucus in the digestive tract and the peristaltic action of the smooth muscle slow down. And so your bowels slow down, the bowel transit time is now longer, and you can get dry, hardened stools and get constipated from chronic stress. On the other hand, on the other process, you could get the opposite with the parasympathetic. You get secretions, your motility of your gut goes up, your digestion goes up. That's why rest and digest is important. So each symptom reveals the psychology. And that's what I started seeing the patterns in. And I started logging that. And I've written a whole textbook that's 1,000 pages on just those correlations. I call it Decoding Your Body's Messages and what the body is trying to reveal. But I'm fascinated by this correlation. And I noticed that the second we've had people who come to my program, the Breakthrough Experience, one of my signature programs, when I show them how to balance the ratios of perceptions and ask quality questions, because let me elaborate. If you're infatuated with somebody and you seek it and you see the positives, then you're, in a sense, conscious of the upsides, but unconscious of the downsides. If you're challenged and you're resenting it and wanting to avoid it, you're conscious of the downsides, but not the upsides. If you see both sides, which we call love, simultaneously, your physiology normalizes, the symptoms go away. And I've been developing for 54 years the Demartini method. And the method is a series of questions, concise questions that take perceptions of these stimuli and events in our life that we think are traumatic or ecstatic and balances them out until they just turn into love. Whenever you have missing information because of the unconscious, you have disorder. That's why they call disease disorders. But the second you ask questions and equilibrate the mind and see full consciousness and see both sides simultaneously, you see the order. Order is reclaiming the information that was missing. So if you're infatuated, if I ask questions, what are the downsides? And if you're resentful, I ask questions, what are the upsides? Or if I see something you think is challenging and traumatic, what are the benefits to neutralize it? Or something that's ecstatic and manic, and what are the drawbacks to neutralize it? You stabilize yourself from these cyclothymic mood swings and volatilities, which create illness and psychological and physiological illness, and stabilize yourself. And so I've been basically developing this methodology to transform perceptions that are in balanced ratios and get them back into balance. And, throughout history, from Pythagoras to Asclepius to Hippocrates to you name it, they've all talked about how important balance is. In fact, every drug in the pharmaceutical industry is basically taking some imbalanced chemistry and trying to balance it. It's all about that. But we don't need to be relying on the drugs necessarily. We have the power inside us to change these chemistries within. But nobody's been teaching how to do that. But the truth is, you have more power than you've been given credence for and benefits of. So what I've done is I've developed that methodology on how to neutralize those perceptions. And every week when I teach the breakthrough experience, I'll get a letter pretty well every week. I've noticed that now I'm sleeping more. Do you know that if you're highly infatuated with something and you try to go to sleep at night, anything that's highly polarized occupies space and time in your mind and creates intrusive thoughts and keeps you awake, so you can't sleep. That insomnia is letting you know you have an imbalanced ratio of perceptions and is trying to let you know, go back and balance them. And the moment you do, you go to sleep and rest. The same if you're highly resentful and don't have a fantasy, but now you have a nightmare and you see all the downsides, no upsides, and you're highly polarized, you can't sleep at night. Be either fantasies or nightmares, infatuation, resentments, or prides and shames within yourself keeping you from sleeping. So the symptoms of insomnia are not random, they're ratios of perception. So in the method, the Demartini method that I developed, I'm asking questions to balance out the perceptions to change the physiological and psychological responses. And people then, almost every week, you get response said, I'm now sleeping. My skin cleared up. A lot of the responses we have in illness are nothing more than cellular regressions to more adaptable states based on the perceptions we have. We're a mesophile. A mesophile is a human being that lives in the mid-zone. But we also have extremophiles, bacteria that live under extreme acid or alkaline, extreme hot or cold, extreme gravity or irradiation. And these extremophiles are primitive cells that lived billions of years ago, microorganisms, but we still have the genome, and we still have the epigenetic systems that they once had. And so when we go under extreme stress and distort things into high polarities, particularly when we go into always and nevers in our perception about events, we regress our cells. They go through what is called a cell danger response, and they regress and reactivate in their genome, primitive genome responses. And we go back embryologically and, in a sense, phylogenetically, we go back and we start having the responses in these cells, which we call symptoms and disease. They can all the way go back even into cancer. I'm working on a new textbook on that right now. So by the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask questions that are intuitive, that are trying to help you see both sides simultaneously and bring balance, your physiology beautifully responds, amazingly responds, and brings wellness. Wellness comes from a balanced mind and a balanced level of perception and a balanced physiology. We also find out that people sometimes overeat or undereat and have eating disorders. Very common. But if you look really carefully, you'll find out that when you overate, it's because you perceived in the stress that stimulated it that you were not getting what you wanted or feeling you were losing what you wanted. And so as a result of not getting what you want, you tend to promote eating with ghrelin. If you feel you're getting something you don't want and you can't escape what you don't want, you stimulate leptin. Because when you're under fight or flight, you don't eat. When you're under rest and digest, you eat. And so when you infatuate with somebody, you want to take them out to dinner and take them home to rest. But when you're into fight and challenge, you want to avoid the person and you don't want to eat. So these eating disorders, again, symptoms to let you know, and if you understand the psychology, you know what questions to ask to help balance it, you can liberate it and give yourself freedom and change your physiology. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing this little presentation, to give that insight, to open the doorway to, instead of just taking a pill for every ill or running and thinking it's something outside you, to give you your power back. We go around and we want to blame something on the outside and then look for something on the outside to give us credit. And there's a time for that under emergencies maybe. But I find that it's the perception of what's out there and the perceptions of what you do that have a lot to do with it, and the actions you do. If you change your perceptions, you change your actions. If you have a perception of that a tiger's about to eat you, you're going to run. If you imagine a little pussycat coming up to you, you're going to pet. So your perception is going to determine your actions, and your actions inside your cell physiology is occurring. Inside the cell, there's little micro filaments, you might say, the little dynein and kinesin micro muscles that are causing materials to go from the center to the periphery, or from the periphery to the center, one for fight or flight when it goes to the periphery, or one for the nucleus when it goes into mitosis to grow. And these are catabolic and anabolic responses at the cell level, and our emotions are running that. And so the cell is just responding to our perceptions of the environment. It's not the environment, it's the perception of the environment. Many years ago, when I was 18 years old, I used to do meditation. I would sit in 100, 110 degree temperature and imagine myself in ice, surrounded by ice. And I could sit in the sun without sweating. I also went into a freezer at Seeker's Horizon, this big health food store, and I went into this freezer to meditate, to see how long I could go in there and imagine myself in the heat. And I was able to override the external circumstances around me. And that taught me that it wasn't so much what the world was doing, it was our perception of the world. And so in the process of doing that, we can transform it. And I know that that's why I love teaching the Demartini method and in the breakthrough experience. I love doing it because I watch the resourcefulness of people. I show them how to bring it all back into balance, their perceptions and actions. And I watch the physiology heal. That was my dream since I was 23 years old and I entered in professional school. I wanted to be able to find a tool that could give people their power back, that didn't rely on things on the outside, but gave them their power from the inside. I said many years ago, 20 years ago, on The Secret, when the voice and the vision on the inside is more profound and powerful than the things on the outside, the people's opinions on the outside, you get to master your life. I really believe that you have the ability to master your physiology and psychology and take command. Almost all my programs that I teach are for that objective. And I really think that, you deserve to be able to have your power. Any area of your life you don't empower, other people are going to overpower you. And that's when you give dissociations to things outside. Anytime we give blame to something on the outside, we're probably going to give credit to something on the outside. The devil made me do it. The angel's going to save me. We're going to have terrible and terrific. These highly extreme polarities are what causes non-resilient, non-adaptable stress responses. The perception of loss of something we seek, or the perception of gain of something we try to avoid. All of those stress responses have been underlying the inflammatory responses, the cytokine responses. Even when we had COVID, part of the reason why many people died is not just because of the COVID. It's because of the stress responses from the media telling people these people are dying. That adds more stress to it. It compounds the issue. And we had heightened responses with our immune response. The immune response is a sensory organ, and it's basically picking up on all the microbes in our body and the environment, and it's giving us insight to our brain. And they work together. And all the microbes that are sitting in our body with our vagus nerve are basically being monitored, and they're actually being governed. We have amazing homeostatic mechanisms. As Walter Cannon said in 1932 in his Wisdom of the Body, amazing homeostatic systems. And in that time, we didn't know as many as we know now. There are thousands of homeostatic mechanisms to maximize wellness and productivity and fulfillment in life. And so the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions asked. If you balance out your perception, you wake up these homeostatic mechanisms to maximize your wellness quotient. And that's been my dream since I was 23. Well, actually before that, but 23 when I started professional school, I just started logging that. And I can't ignore it. There's no way I can ignore what I've seen. There's no way. and it's just not necessarily mainstream. It's almost like there's a tiny bit of a commercial conflict of interest sitting in the health field today that's blocking even great researchers in health. The funding and everything else is not always getting to give people their power back. And it's a bit frustrating. So that's why I teach what I teach, to try to give people some of that power back. You got nothing to lose by educating yourself and studying the autonomic nervous system. And the program I did, the Decoding Your Body's Message, I've summarized it all there for you. But it's wise to do it. Don't take my word or anybody's word for it, but go and do your own homework and go and explore it. With AI, you can speed that up now and go and learn about physiology. But take advantage of what you have inside you. The magnificence of your body is far greater than any of the fantasies you have and any of the nightmares that you might be avoiding and seeking. I'm a firm believer that you have power inside yourself, the power that made the body, that organized it embryologically from the sperm and the egg and gave rise to you in 52 generations of cell divisions, that this organized, this magnificent thing that is able to do all the things we do as a human being is still the most powerful part of your being and that allows you to bring wellness. And we're not capitalizing it, using it to the fullest. And so I'm just trying to give you a little tip and a little tool on how to start that engine running. Because the reality is you've got more power. That's why there's people that have been told to go home and die of cancer, and they changed their perceptions, loved their family, cleared out some of the baggage, started eating differently, started walking, started exercising, started doing something more natural. Sometimes diseases are the last-ditch effort to try to get us back on track to authenticity and start to walk a path of authenticity and sustainable fair exchange and equanimity. And when we do, and we balance that, our physiology changes. And there's cases after cases through the ages of people that have these spontaneous remissions from these so-called illnesses. Maybe these illnesses are signals. Maybe they're trying to guide us. Maybe they're not terrible things. Maybe there's a meaning behind it. I love helping people find the order in their chaos and the meaning behind their so-called tragedies and things. So I just know that if we go through and we study that and learn that, it gives us an advantage. And I've watched thousands of people transform their physiology with changing their perceptions. That's why I try to teach the Demartini method, because I know that you've got a tool that you can do and you can reduce stress by yourself on the spot right there, and it's claims, and you can watch the physiology change. And I think that it's almost insane that that's not a standard procedure in people's lives. And I don't know why we don't teach that kind of education right in the educational system and give people the opportunity to empower their lives. So I'm pretty emphatic about that because I've seen the impact of it, and it doesn't cost anything. Some of the greatest things in life don't even cost anything because it's just your own ability to perceive and decide and act. That is the three things you have control over: perception, decisions, and actions. You want to master those three because that's the ones that control your life. If you try to expect things outside that and give credit and blame to things on the outside and disempower your life and subordinate and be a follower of some paradigm that may be conflict of interest, that's another story. But if you want to master your life, just know you have the capacity to do more than you probably are doing right now. And that's why I'm taking this moment to share a little brief presentation on your physiology, because I really believe that the physiology, your psychology, even the sociology around you is a feedback mechanism guiding you to the most authentic you, the most sustainable, fair exchanging you, the one that's in a state of equanimity and poise and presence, the one that has purpose and meaning, the one that's productive, that makes a difference, that has something unique to offer the world. So I just wanted to share that today and give you a little presentation that I know will maybe stimulate your thinking to the power you have within. Again, the power that made the body is the one that has the capacity to heal the body. May you take that on, and I hope to share more with you about this, and come and join me for the breakthrough or some programs that I can share more of this information with you, because I really believe you'll have an advantage over the people that don't ever get this information.